Welcome to today's explainer. If you think about it, the heart really is the ultimate engine, right? And today, we're decoding the complex maze of CPT guidelines for its four vital doors, the cardiac valves. If you've ever felt like navigating the cardiovascular section of the coding manual is kind of like, well, performing open heart surgery in the dark, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to shine a spotlight on the exact guidelines you need to accurately capture these really intricate procedures. But before we open that first door, we've got to establish the fundamental divide in modern cardiovascular coding. Literally, everything hinges on whether the surgeon is using a transcatheter approach, meaning percutaneous or minimally invasive access, like TAVR or TMVR, versus a traditional open approach that requires surgical exposure. This technical distinction, it's huge. It drives the entire coding manual, dictating not just your primary code, but all the bundling rules and add-ons. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll decode the aortic valve, master mitral valve procedures, navigate the tricuspid valve, and review pulmonary valve coding guidelines. Then we'll wrap it all up with some essential valve coding takeaways. All right, Section 1, Decoding the Aortic Valve. Let's dive right into arguably the densest section of the book. When we look at TAVR, transcatheter aortic valve replacement, the coding matrix perfectly maps the physical anatomical approach directly to the alphanumeric code. It's actually a pretty beautiful progression. Check this out. 33361 represents the percutaneous femoral approach. Moving down, 33362 is open femoral, 33363 is open axillary, 33364 is open iliac, 33365 is transaortic, and finally, 33366 is transapical. You literally just follow the surgeon's hands to find your code. Now here is where we need to be super careful. There is a lot of work bundled into these TAVR codes that you might be tempted to report separately. Don't do it. Percutaneous access, placing the sheath, and balloon aortic valvulopathy, they're all baked right into that primary code. Oh, and I want to specifically highlight this. Temporary pacemaker insertion for rapid pacing, that's code 33210, is also included. We absolutely cannot bill that separately during a TAVR procedure. So the crucial point to remember here is this single vital rule. TAVR and TAVI procedures require two physician operators. Because of the immense complexity and coordination required, all components of the procedure must be reported using modifier 62 for co-surgery. If you miss this modifier, you're fundamentally misrepresenting how the procedure was actually performed. Now, you might be wondering, what about stroke prevention during these procedures? Well, that brings us to add-on code 33370 for cerebral embolic protection. This code encompasses three clinical steps. First up, percutaneous arterial access. Then the actual delivery of the embolic protection filters, and finally, the removal of those filters along with the arteriotomy closure. Since the access and closure are built right into 33370, we use this specific add-on code to capture the preventative work without double billing for the access site. Shifting gears to the open approach for the aortic valve, let's contrast codes 33390 and 33391. This perfectly illustrates how clinical complexity directly dictates your code selection. 33390 is for a simple open valvuloplasty. Think basic debridement or simple resuspension. But the second the surgeon moves to a complex repair, like leaflet extension, resection, or an annuloplasty, you've got to shift to 33391. Section 2, Mastering Mitral Valve Procedures. Let's leave the aorta behind and transition smoothly to the second stop on our anatomical tour. All right, let's see how this builds. For TMVR, transcatheter mitral valve repair, we are looking at code 33418 for the initial prosthesis and 33419 for any additional devices placed during that same session. What I really want you to notice here is step 2, the transeptal puncture. Just like the TAVR codes, TMVR codes bundle the heavy lifting. That includes access, sheath placement, and that crucial transeptal puncture required to reach the left side of the heart. We've got some strict exclusionary rules here that you definitely need to commit to memory. During a TMVR, do not report angiography or fluoroscopy if it's being used for procedural guidance. Left ventricular angiography to assess mitral regurgitation for guidance included. Routine right and left heart catheterizations for hemodynamic measurements, yep, those are also strictly off limits for separate billing. Looking at the open mitral procedures, I want to briefly compare open codes 33425 and 33426. They're essentially identical procedures, open heart valvuloplasty with cardiopulmonary bypass, with one glaring difference. Code 33426 requires the addition of a physical prosthetic ring. The simple presence of that hardware completely changes your code selection. Moving right along to Section 3, navigating the tricuspid valve. Let's tackle the right side of the heart. You know what's genuinely fantastic about the CPT manual? It's when it gives us consistent, predictable logic. Notice the exact mirroring logic here between the mitral and tricuspid sections. For open tricuspid valvuloplasty, we have code 33463 for a repair without ring insertion and 33464 for a repair with ring insertion. The anatomy changed, for sure, but the coding principles stayed exactly the same. However, the tricuspid valve does have its own unique anatomical quirks. Take a look at code 33468. This is a highly specific structural anomaly code for tricuspid valve repositioning and plication, specifically for Epstein anomaly. It just proves a core rule of our explainer today. Unique, specific anatomy will always drive the coding manual. Section 4. Pulmonary Valve Coding Guidelines. Let's hit our final valve destination on the anatomical tour. For transcatheter pulmonary valve implantation, we use code 33477. Let's rapid-fire the inclusions here. Percutaneous access and sheath, pre-stenting of the valve delivery site, percutaneous balloon angioplasty of the conduit, and all intraprocedural contrast and imaging. I want to explicitly warn you on this one. Do not report fluoroscopy code 76000 with this procedure. It is completely bundled in. And this brilliantly illustrates a really cool spatial exception in the coding guidelines. While angioplasty or stenting at the prosthetic delivery site is bundled into 33477, the guidelines create a strict exception. If the surgeon performs angioplasty or stenting at a completely separate pulmonary artery site, away from the delivery zone, you actually can report those interventions separately. In real estate and in coding, location is everything. To conclude the pulmonary section, if the surgeon opts for a traditional open approach to replace the pulmonary valve, the coding drops all the transcatheter complexity and just gives us one straightforward code, 334075 for the open replacement. Section 5. Essential Valve Coding Takeaways. We've toured all 4 valves, so let's gather all the pieces together for the overarching rules. What happens when a transcatheter procedure goes south, or maybe just requires extra support, and cardiopulmonary bypass is needed? We use specific add-on codes for that. 33367 is for percutaneous peripheral cannulation, 33368 is for open peripheral cannulation, and 33369 is for central cannulation. You just layer these on top of your primary transcatheter valve codes when the heart-lung machine has to step in. Finally, let's drill down on diagnostic coronary angiography performed during these valve procedures. Guys, this is a major source of billing errors. You can only bill it separately if it meets a strict, distinct indication rule. Basically, that means there was no prior study available, the prior study had inadequate visualization, or the patient had a distinct clinical change requiring a new evaluation. If it's just being done for procedural guidance, it's bundled. No exceptions.
And that brings us to the end of our anatomical tour. Mastering these guidelines is about a whole lot more than just compliance. It accurately captures the true immense complexity of cardiovascular care that your providers are delivering every single day. So, I'll leave you with this. Based on what we've uncovered today, which valves bundling rules will you double-check first tomorrow morning? Keep that knowledge flowing, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.